She came home unexpectedly and found her father and brother locked out in the storm by her husband. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Heartstrings and Stories, a place where we explore the shadows of the human heart and the powerful, often poetic justice that finds its way back to us. Before we begin, if you believe that family is the one sanctuary you should always be able to count on, hit that like button. Today's story is a tough one. It's about betrayal that cuts so deep, it chills you to the bone. It's about a woman named Alara, a storm that wasn't just meteorological, and a secret so vile it would redefine her entire existence. This is a story that asks, what would you do if the person you trusted most turned out to be a monster? Comment with family first if you're ready to find out. Let's begin. Alara believed she had built a charmed life. At 32, she was a successful graphic designer, working on a major project that was the culmination of a year's worth of work. Her husband, Julian, was a charismatic and ambitious real estate developer. He was charming, handsome, and on the surface, utterly devoted to her. They lived in a stunning, minimalist glass and steel house that Julian had designed himself, a symbol of their modern, successful life. It was a fortress of their love, or so she thought. Ilara's true foundation, however, was not the house or her career. It was her family. Her father, Walter, a kind-eyed, retired history teacher with rough hands that could fix anything, and her younger brother, Leo, a cheerful mechanic with a heart of gold. They were simple, honest men who lived in a modest but warm home across town. Julian tolerated them, but Ilara often sensed a vague condescension in his tone, a feeling that he considered them beneath the life he had created for them. "They don't understand our world, darling," he'd say, smoothing his tie. "All that clutter, that sentimentality. We've moved beyond that." Ilara would brush it off, attributing it to differing backgrounds. She loved Julian, and she loved her father and brother. She worked hard to bridge the gap, a constant, subtle translator between the two halves of her heart. The catalyst was the storm. Meteorologists had been calling it the storm of the decade. A furious nor'easter was barreling toward the coast, promising hurricane-force winds and torrential rain. Ilara was 2 hours away at a client's retreat, which was abruptly cut short as the company scrambled to send everyone home before the weather turned lethal. She tried calling Julian. No answer. Probably in a meeting, she thought, or the signal is already getting spotty. She wasn't worried. Julian knew about the storm. He was practical, a planner. He'd be prepared. What she didn't know was that her father and brother's ancient roof had finally given up the fight. A large section had collapsed under the first onslaught of rain, flooding their living room and rendering the house uninhabitable. With hotels booked solid and shelters flooding, they had only one place to go, Ilara's strong, modern house. They called Julian. "Julian, it's Walter. We've got a bit of an emergency." Julian's voice was smooth, laced with feigned concern. "Walter." "Goodness, are you all right?" Walter explained the situation, his voice strained with embarrassment. "We just need to wait out the worst of it. We won't be any trouble." A pause on the line. Ilara could have never imagined the cold calculation happening in that pause. "Of course, Walter. Come right over. The storm is getting bad, so hurry. I'll leave the side door unlocked for you." It was a lie. A cruel, deliberate lie. Ilara's knuckles were tight on the steering wheel. The drive home was a nightmare of reduced visibility and howling winds. Her sturdy car felt like a leaf in the gale. Relief flooded her when she finally turned onto their street, a quiet cul-de-sac that was now a river of swirling water and fallen branches. And then she saw them. 2 figures, huddled together on their covered but exposed front porch, pressed against the large oak door. They were soaked to the skin, shivering violently. For a dizzying second, she didn't recognize them. Were they stranded strangers? She pulled into the driveway, her headlights illuminating the heartbreaking scene. It was her father. His arm was wrapped tightly around her brother, trying to shield him with his own body. Leo's face was pale, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. They were surrounded by two small, waterlogged duffel bags. "Dad!" "Leo!" Alara screamed, throwing her car door open and fighting the wind to get to them. "My God! What are you doing out here?" The look on her father's face would be seared into her memory forever. It wasn't just cold or exhaustion. It was a profound, gut-wrenching hurt. A betrayal. "Elara!" Walter's voice was a raspy whisper, barely audible over the storm. We called Julian. The roof. He said to come. He said the door would be unlocked." Ilara's world tilted. She fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking with a violent mixture of fear and a dawning, terrifying rage. She unlocked the door and practically carried them inside into the blissful, warm, dry silence of the entryway. The house was pristine, warm, quiet. A fire crackled merrily in the living room fireplace, the stark contrast to the hellish suffering outside and on her porch was obscene. "Julian?" Ilara's voice echoed through the house, sharp and dangerous. Her husband appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a comfortable cashmere sweater and holding a glass of red wine. He looked calm, confused. "Ilara, you're home early. I was getting worried." His sentence died in his throat as he looked down and saw the two waterlogged figures shivering on her marble floor, puddles forming around them. His expression flickered. For a nanosecond, Ilara saw it. Not surprise, but annoyance. Cold, calculated annoyance. Then, the mask snapped back into place. "Walter? Leo? What on earth?" he said, descending the stairs with a facade of concern. "I told you the storm was too bad to travel." I said, "You should have called back." Walter looked up, and in a voice stripped of all its usual warmth said, "You told us to come. You said the door would be open." Julian gave a practiced, bewildered laugh. "There must be a misunderstanding on the phone. The storm must have cut us off. I would never have told you to come out in this. I said to sit tight and I'd try to find you a hotel room." He was good. He was so convincingly plausible. If Ilara hadn't seen that flicker of annoyance, she might have believed him. If she hadn't seen the profound, honest hurt in her father's eyes. Leo, who had remained silent, simply looked at Julian with a new, cold understanding. "The side door was locked, Julian. We checked. We knocked. We rang the bell for 20 minutes. We saw you walking past the window." Julian's face tightened. "I was on a conference call with noise-canceling headphones. I didn't hear a thing. This is just a terrible, terrible mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And in that moment, Ilara knew. The fortress of her life wasn't made of glass and steel. It was made of lies, and it had just shattered. Can you even imagine? The sheer audacity, the cruelty? I need to know what you're thinking right now. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever had someone you trust completely show you a side of them you never knew existed? The next few hours were a tense, silent nightmare. Ilara ran hot baths for her father and brother, found them dry clothes, and made them endless cups of sweet tea while Julian hovered, maintaining his act of bewildered innocence. But the chill in the air had nothing to do with the storm outside. Once Walter and Leo, exhausted and emotionally shattered, were settled in the guest room, Ilara turned to Julian. The storm inside her had only just begun. "We need to talk. Now. In your office." "Ilara, darling, please. It was a miscommunication." You're upset and I don't blame you, but… Your office. Julian. She had never used that tone with him. It brooked no argument. In his sleek, minimalist office, she didn't sit. She stood before his desk, a statue of pure fury. They could have died of hypothermia out there. Don't be dramatic. It's unpleasant, not lethal. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't do this on purpose. He sighed, a performance of a man patiently dealing with an irrational partner. Elara, I love you. Why would I ever do something so pointlessly cruel to your family? And that's when she saw it. His eyes flickered, just for an instant, to the bottom drawer of his desk. It was a nervous tick, a tell. She'd seen it before when he was hiding a birthday present or a surprise trip itinerary. But this was different. Open the drawer, she said, her voice cold. What? Don't be absurd. Open the drawer, Julian. He flinched. Her rage was a physical force in the room. Slowly, reluctantly, he pulled the drawer open. On top of a stack of files was a sleek, brand-new smartphone. A burner phone. Her blood ran cold. What is that? A backup phone for emergencies, in case the power goes out. Since when do you need a secret phone for emergencies? She asked, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. She grabbed it before he could stop her. It was locked, but the notification screen lit up. A single text message preview was visible from an unsaved number. Unknown number. Is the situation handled? Are they gone? We need to finalize the paperwork before she… Elara's world stopped. Paperwork. The word echoed in the hollowed-out chamber of her chest. She looked from the phone to her husband's face. The mask had finally, completely slipped. His expression was a mixture of panic and cold fury. Before she… What, Julian? She asked, her voice terrifyingly calm. Before she what? He said nothing. He just stared, a stranger wearing her husband's skin. It was Leo who provided the next piece of the puzzle. He'd come downstairs for a glass of water and overheard the escalating argument. He stood in the doorway, no longer the cheerful little brother, but a man filled with a protective rage for his sister. It's the prenup, isn't it? Leo said, his voice hard. Elara spun to face him. The prenup? What about it? Their prenuptial agreement was standard, or so she'd believed. It protected Julian's premarital assets and her own. They'd both signed it. I heard him, Leo said, his eyes locked on Julian. Last month, when I was fixing Elara's car in the driveway, you were on the phone by the open window. You were talking about a clause, about proving her family's instability and undue influence to void her part of the agreement if you divorced. I thought it was just business talk. Some client. I didn't think it was us. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a freight train. Julian had been looking for a way out. Their marriage was comfortable, but Elara's success was starting to rival his own. He'd met someone new, someone he believed could offer him more. But a divorce would mean splitting their assets, the assets she had helped him grow. The prenup had a morality clause, a complex legalese-laden section about conduct unbecoming and proven psychological manipulation by external parties. Julian's lawyer had clearly found a way to twist it. If he could prove that her unstable family was a negative influence, that they were leeches trying to sabotage the marriage for financial gain, he could potentially void the entire agreement and leave her with nothing. Locking them out in the storm was a test, a cruel, calculated move to provoke a reaction. If Walter and Leo had gotten angry, if they'd caused a scene, he could have recorded it, used it as evidence of their volatility. He never intended for Elara to find out. He expected them to be turned away, humiliated, and to go to a motel. their anger driving a wedge between them and Alara that he could then exploit. He had gambled on a storm to hide his monstrosity, and he had lost. The layers of this betrayal are just breathtaking. The financial manipulation, the emotional warfare. It makes you wonder, what would you have done in Alara's shoes? Would you have exploded? Would you have gone quiet? Take a second to like this video if your heart is just pounding right now, because the twist isn't over yet. Alara felt a surreal calm descend upon her. The rage was still there, a nuclear reactor in her soul, but it was now contained, focused into a weapon of ice. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, and she saw nothing but a hollow, greedy shell. "Get out," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Alara, be reasonable. The storm, we can fix this," Julian pleaded, his voice oily and insincere. "Get out of my house," she repeated, louder, her voice cracking with authority. "Our house," he sneered, the facade finally gone for good. "We'll see what a judge has to say about that. And about the hidden assets you've been stashing. I'm sure your burner phone friend will have a lot to say about that." His face went pale. She had guessed, but his reaction confirmed it. There was more. There was always more with a man like this. He left then, grabbing his keys and his main phone, sputtering threats about calling his lawyer. The slam of the door was the most satisfying sound Alara had ever heard. She sank to the floor, the adrenaline receding, leaving her trembling. But she wasn't alone. Two pairs of arms were suddenly around her. Her father's, strong and steady, and her brother's, loyal and fierce. They held her as she finally broke down and cried, not for the marriage she had lost, but for the truth she had found. "I'm so sorry," Walter murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry, my brave girl." "It's not your fault," she sobbed. "None of this is your fault." When her tears were spent, she looked up, her eyes red but clear. He's not going to win. The storm outside was finally passing. The wind had died down to a low moan. The worst was over. But for Julian, the storm was just beginning. Alara was a designer. She understood systems, networks, and connections. While Julian thought he held all the power with his money and his lawyers, Alara held something far more valuable: knowledge of him. She remembered his arrogance. He'd once bragged about a hidden security system he'd installed in the house, not for safety, but to monitor the cleaners. "You can never be too careful with the help," he'd said. He'd shown her the app on his tablet, a live feed of every room, including his office. The footage was stored on a private cloud-based server. He was too arrogant to think she'd ever use it against him. He was too arrogant to remember she knew the password. It was the date of their first anniversary, a date he clearly no longer valued. With shaking hands, she found the app on his office tablet, which he'd left behind in his hurry. She logged in. She navigated to the footage from that afternoon. She fast-forwarded to the time her father and brother would have arrived. And there it was, in perfect, high-definition, silent video. She watched Julian, glass of wine in hand, look out the window at the driving rain. She saw her father's car pull up. She saw Julian watch them get out and hurry to the side door. She saw him smile a small, cold smile as he watched them try the handle. She saw him walk past the front window, see Leo knocking, and deliberately turn up the volume on the stereo. She saw him settle back into his leather chair, take a sip of wine, and pick up his personal phone to send a text, undoubtedly to his accomplice. He had recorded his own crime, his own utterly heartless, calculated betrayal. Alara didn't just save the footage, she downloaded it. She emailed it to herself, her brother, and her father. She backed it up on 3 separate drives. This was her insurance. This was her justice. The divorce was not the battle Julian expected. When his high-priced lawyer made veiled threats about the prenup and undue influence from her family, Ilara's lawyer simply played the video. There was no negotiation. There was only surrender. The prenup was voided in her favor. The court, appalled by his conduct, awarded Ilara the house, a significant portion of their joint assets, and a hefty lump sum. The hidden assets his burner phone friend was helping him hide were discovered and brought into the settlement. Julian was financially and publicly eviscerated. The story, of course, got out. In the world of high-stakes real estate, reputation is everything. His business crumbled, his new partner left him, he became a pariah, a cautionary tale. But the true victory wasn't financial. Ilara sold the cold glass house, the symbol of a beautiful, empty lie. She used part of the money to build a brand new, solid, beautiful roof over her father and brother's home. She moved in with them for a while, not out of necessity, but out of choice. The 3 of them, surrounded by the clutter and sentimentality that Julian had despised, healed together. They filled the house with laughter, with shared meals, with the undeniable, unshakable truth of their love for one another. They had weathered the storm, not as a perfect, fragile unit, but as a family, flawed, real, and fiercely loyal. One evening, months later, they were all on the new, sturdy porch, watching a gentle rain fall. It was peaceful. It was real. Leo looked at his sister, a smile on his face. You know, for a second there I thought he'd won. Walter nodded, taking a sip of his tea. The bad guy with the plan. Ilara smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes for the first time in a long time. He had a plan, she said softly, looking out at the clean, washed world. But we had the truth. And karma. Karma always collects its debt. And there it is. The storm passed, the truth was revealed, and karma delivered its verdict. This story is a powerful reminder that no facade, no matter how perfect, can hide a corrupt heart forever. That truth, no matter how buried, has a way of pushing through the rubble. And that the love of a loyal family is the only real wealth there is. What do you think was Julian's ultimate downfall? Was it his greed, his arrogance, or was it his fundamental underestimation of Ilara's strength and the bond she shared with her family? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that light always follows darkness, then do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because here on Heartstring, we believe that no betrayal goes unseen, and no good deed goes unrewarded. Stay strong, stay true, and I'll see you in the next story.